Now that I've seen Spider-Man Far From Home, the time has come to rank Sam Raimi's Spider-Man through Spider-Man Far From Home, worst to best. How would you rank the cinematic Spider-Verse? Let's do that in the comments. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my ranking of the cinematic Spider-Verse. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, all the way through Spider-Man Far From Home, worst to best. How would you rank the Spider-Verse? Let's do that in the comments. By the way, got a new patron over the week. Actually got 2 new patrons, and in this video, I'm saying a huge thank you to Sean Austin. Sean, thank you for becoming a patron of Durbania. It means so much to me. If you like what you see here, I have the link to my Patreon page in the description below. I'm gonna utterly spoiler talk Spider-Man Far From Home. So I'm just letting you know, if you haven't seen it, when I get there, I'm gonna spoil it, but we're gonna have fun with it. So here we go. Number 9, Spider-Man 3. Yeah, you see that? You see that right there? That is exactly why this one falls in my last place. That was just so cornball, so hokey. It's the thing that we try to forget. Now look, it's Peter Parker having the black suit and it pulling out the worst in him and the darkness in him and all of that stuff. There could be an argument made that him doing that cornball dance, it just shows you that he's this nerdy kid and that's what the darkness in him is. So it's not really that dark. And you know what? That's a good argument and that's a valid argument. Even with that argument in place, I still don't like that scene. It just felt a little bit too cheesy, especially when the whole message of the movie is Peter confronts the darkness in himself, and in doing so, learns to forgive the Sandman so he can let go of that darkness and let go of that bitterness. So kind of in light of that overall story, that little dancing scene doesn't really work for me, on top of it just kind of being cringe-worthy, cheesy. And this movie just had so much going on. They threw in Sandman, so we had to get Sandman's origin and tie it to Peter Parker's origin so we can have that connection with Sandman killing Uncle Ben. And then Peter Parker had to get the black suit. And then, of course, we got Harry Osborn and his whole crazy plot line of being the Goblin and all that stuff. And then, of course, we have to go and throw in Eddie Brock. It just was way too much stuff going on. It's like they stuffed this movie with so much, and it kind of just lost the greatness that it could have been. And when I say that, I mean it, because one of the great things about this movie was the plot of Peter forgiving the Sandman.
I forgive you.
That was, like, hands down the best part of Spider-Man 3. And because of that, I want to like that movie more than I did. I just wish it wasn't as stuffed so that could have risen more to the top. Number 8, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, this one kind of suffered from the same problem as Spider-Man 3. And for me, the biggest problem was, you know, at this time, because the MCU was just gaining in popularity, so here's Sony wanting to build their own Spider-Verse and connected universe with that. And you know what? That wasn't a bad idea. The bad idea was that they took The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and stuffed it with so many villains and so many storylines so they could use that Spider-Man brand name and start to build the Sinister Six in this movie and then jettison off to a Sinister Six movie. They kind of got in their own way, so build it up a little bit more slowly and just make quality stuff as you're building. And I kind of feel like that's where Amazing Spider-Man 2 suffered. Now, I love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. I thought Amazing Spider-Man 2 still had some good moments. I like how Hans Zimmer used the score to show us what is going on inside of Electro's head. I thought that was creative. The relationship between Harry and Peter was kind of cool, how they brought him into that. I thought the actor who did him was pretty good. It's just the final reveal of him as the Goblin did not work for me at all. When he injected himself with, this, spider serum that's going to give him the Goblin powers, the whole sequence where he was transforming, that was pretty darn awesome. When he finally showed up, I was like, oh, that's disappointing. And Gwen Stacy, that was a great moment where he almost saves her, and at the last second her head smacks that concrete and she's gone. It's like a superhero's worst nightmare, and I felt like that scene was done really well. So there's things about Amazing Spider-Man 2 that I think are good and done well. I just feel like it got in its own way when it's trying to build a universe for the Sinister Six. Number 7, Spider-Man. When I first saw Sam Raimi's Spider-Man when I was in high school, I thought this movie was so cheesy. All of my friends loved it, and I walked out of there going, oh my gosh, that was so cheesy. And I still do. Like, when I go back and I watch the movie, there's still things about some of the dialogue and certain scenes like where Spider-Man has just been kind of, gassed by the Green Goblin and he wakes up on the roof. The way they're talking back and forth, the dialogue was very Power Rangey. It looked very Power Rangey, so there's still moments where I kind of cringe. But really, when you dive into the story, it's a good story of the hero's journey, and it gives you a good lesson about what you feed. If you feed the darkness in yourself, when the pressure's on, then the darkness is what's gonna come out. You saw that with Goblin, how Osborn had been feeding his jealousies, feeding his anger, feeding his insecurities, and the moment he had the power, that darkness rose out of him. And Peter Parker, he's been feeding that good side. But the moment he got the powers, he still had things to learn. He still had those temptations to face. He still made some mistakes and stumbled along the way. But because he fed that good side, that light side, that is what came out. So there's a lot of stuff about this movie that I do like and enjoy. Number 6. Venom. Now, since I've only seen it once, when I think of Venom, here's what immediately jumps to my mind. I loved the relationship between Eddie Brock and the symbiote. I thought that was so cool and so well done. I also loved the action. When I think of this movie and I think of the action, that's one of those things that stands out. And when I was watching this movie, the next thing that really pops in my mind is the fact that I feel like this movie started off good and started to build a really solid and strong base. And capped it off well. They built like a good solid roof. But there's nothing in the middle of this structure at all. I feel like since I knew those rumors that it was kind of leaning towards an R rating, but then they went through and cut a ton of stuff out to make it PG-13, I feel like I can feel the chunk that is missing. Number 5, The Amazing Spider-Man. I really do like Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, and I did, as a whole, like these movies, and I definitely like The Amazing Spider-Man 1 better than the second one. I thought, if you're going to reboot this movie and start over at the beginning so soon after Tobey Maguire and all of that stuff, I think they did a good job making things a bit different. I thought it was interesting exploring Peter Parker's parents and who they were. That Peter Parker's dad was the guy who actually made the genetically enhanced spiders. I thought that was cool. So, I like Andrew Garfield. Emma Stone was really great as Gwen Stacy. I really liked Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy together in this one. It was a lot of fun. I love action sequences towards the end where Peter's unmasked to Gwen's father. That whole scene where he kind of just turns around slowly and reveals his identity to Gwen's father so that he could get to Oscorp, so that he could save Gwen. I thought that was a really, really cool scene, and I love those POV shots, point of view where he's swinging and you see his hands as he's swinging. It kind of, for brief moments, is yeah, I'm Spider-Man. So there's things about Amazing Spider-Man that I really did enjoy. Number 4, Spider-Man 2. What stands out to me when I think of this movie is the train sequence where Dr. Octopus is fighting him on the train and then he destroys the brake. The train is heading towards the dead end and Spider-Man jumps in front of it and just, he tries to stop the train. It's so good. That scene always stands out to me, and it's one of my favorite Spider-Man sequences. I just love that entire scene. There's a lot of stuff that I liked about Spider-Man 2. Recently, I was watching The Film Theorist, and he did a film theory about why did Spider-Man 2 lose his Why did Spider-Man 2 lose his powers? Why did Spider-Man lose his powers in Spider-Man 2? It's a really interesting video about PTSD and how because of PTSD, post-traumatic stress from the first movie was really impacting him in this movie and it was impacting his powers. He built a really good solid case. I would say check it out. It's a pretty solid video and gave me even more of an appreciation for maybe what Sam Raimi was going for in Spider-Man 2, but the real struggle that Peter was having, and because of that mental struggle and the way I took it in a theological analysis, he was being double-minded. How can a double-minded person receive anything? Because they have no solid foundation that they're standing on, and you really see Peter torn between wanting the normal life, torn between wanting to be the superhero, and because he's so torn, it's just, he has no balance, and so it's kind of interesting to watch him come into his own in that movie. Number 3, SpiderMan Homecoming. As far as live-action Spider-Mans go, Tom Holland is my favorite of the live-action Spider-Mans. I mean, all the way from his witty banter in Civil War, all the way to Infinity War and Endgame, the lines that he gives and delivers just, you know, makes me cry. He's such a good actor. And my new favorite Spider-Man sequence is in SpiderMan Homecoming.
Come on, Spider-Man. Come on, Spider-Man.
gosh, it's just so flippin' awesome. So I think Spider-Man Homecoming is pure fun. Like, I think you watch that movie because you don't want to think that much. You watch that movie because it's pure superhero fun. And so I really enjoyed Spider-Man Homecoming. It's one of my favorites, and I love Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Coming in at number 2, Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, this is where I'm going to start diving into some spoilers. It's because of the spoiler territory in this movie that it's so high up on my list. It's just so flippin' good. But what really got me in this movie was all of the post-credit scenes. Because first off, Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, he was freaking amazing. But you know what I really liked? That it wasn't a real multiverse. I'm a little burned on the multiverse idea because Flash and Arrow with their multiverse, it just drives me crazy because it makes the death of the heroes meaningless. Because, well, then we'll just bring that character back from Earth 37. Woohoo! And it's like, I mean, I know they're not exactly the same, but it kind of just undercuts the heaviness of when a main character gets killed off. And we just lost Tony Stark, so it's like, are they going to take this multiverse and maybe accidentally undercut the full weight of his sacrifice? And I was so happy. There's probably is a multiverse, but I was just so happy that in this movie, it wasn't the multiverse, that he is not a Mysterio from another Earth. It was very cool that as Master of Illusion, using Stark Tech, that he worked for Stark on that BARF project from Civil War and, you know, creating those holograms to, you know, deal with memories and stuff like that. So he's this Master of Illusion, and so the elementals weren't real, they were illusion. The destruction was caused by these drones that were projecting. I like that whole backstory. I thought was so cool. But what's even cooler about it is when you get into those post-credit scenes, I was blown away. First off, to see J. Jonah Jameson from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man back as J. Jonah Jameson. But then to have the big reveal that Mysterio did one final illusion before he died and made it look as though Spider-Man was the villain and Mysterio was the hero, and then says Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Are you kidding me? They just changed Spider-Man forever. This Spider-Man is destined on a whole different path than any other live-action version we have ever seen. And that was so smart, and it was so well done how they threw that in there. But then, we're not done yet. How long has Fury been a Skrull? Like, when did that start? Was it only this movie? Or has it been further back and we just don't quite know it yet? How long have the Skrulls been Hill and Fury? Those moments and those reveals and those post-credit scenes, on top of the rest of this movie just being a blast. Taking Peter Parker on the next step and the next phase of his journey, MJ finding out that he's Spider-Man. I mean, all of that stuff was so well done, and it was just so much fun. On top of the reveals. Good golly. Number 1, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I was really debating, because Far From Home is really, like, right there for me. Like, it's almost number 1. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse just had so much fun with the character of Spider-Man. I mean, a great introduction into Miles Morales, who I don't know anything about, so it was cool for me to meet Miles Morales. It was really cool to see the different versions of the different Spider people. It was cool to finally see Spider-Gwen. Again, I haven't read too many of these comics, so this is my first time meeting Spider-Gwen, and I really liked her character. Spider-Ham was hysterical. Nicolas Cage, Spider-Man Noir. Yes, that was flippin' fantastic. And a little bit more of a round Spider-Man eating a little too much pizza. It was just so much fun bringing all these Spider people from the different Spider-Verses together and still tell a cohesive story without it being too much. So, that's my ranking of all 9 cinematic Spider-Verse movies. How would you rank these movies worst to best? Let's talk about that in the comments. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next ranking video, which I'm going to do a ranking of all 23 MCU movies worst to best. So I'm excited to dive into that and see where Far From Home falls in that ranking. Let me say a huge thank you to my brand new patron, Sean Austin. I actually got 2 new patrons over the week, and I'm super excited. So today, I'm saying thank you to Sean Austin. So thank you so much, Sean, for jumping on board and becoming a patron of Durbania. Durbania. So if you like what you see here, you can check out my Patreon page. I got the link to that in my comments below, so check that out. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.